Okay, welcome everyone, and I hope you had a good week. Today we should be having our last session, which looks at change management. I was thinking we go through that today. Then tomorrow, you should be able to present your group assignment. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So let me
Yeah,
start.
maybe are we to upload the slides for the presentation?
Yes, please.
Yeah, maybe you need to enable in mode. I think it expired.
Okay.
Time needed to be.
I'll do that after this lecture.
Okay, then.
Okay. Let me share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me start. So today we are looking at change management. Why? We looked at it. I think this class was part of the ICT design selection, design selection and implementation, and we looked at change management. So why are we looking at this as well? The reason being is we're also bringing in a change with ICT strategy and policy planning. There is a change that is coming in. So change management is part and parcel of it. Once you're implementing your strategy and policy, you must also consider change management. So why do we carry out change management? Primary reason is that we are bringing about a change in something that we're doing. Our ICT strategies and policies may bring about a change in business processes. Just give you an example. A password policy can bring about a change in business processes. If you put in your policy that there must be a periodic change of passwords for all staff members, that automatically brings about a change in business processes. If you bring about a change on who should access what information, and this before this was not recognized, that's already a change in business processes. So we are thinking in those as long as you're bringing about a change. If we're changing certain things, it also may bring about organizational structural changes. Management roles may be revised or emphasized. You may have new work assignments. Yeah. And then you may emphasize or create new stakeholder relationships. So all these changes, because that may come in for any other reason, may not be ICT strategy, they may cause fear and resistance. So we must be able to manage these changes effectively, that we have the least possible resistance and we see a change in the adoption of these changes. Why are we doing this? Remember, primarily when we talked about ICT strategy, we said we are talking about supporting organizational goals or the business goals. So we want to see an improvement in efficiency, an improvement in profits, whatever it is, we want to see that improvement. So we wouldn't want that what we are proposing or what we are putting forward to be implemented to encounter that resistance. So remember, we are looking at end users and we are trying to mitigate resistance from end users. And this requires proper education and training. Now, when we talk about education in general, we are referring to communication. I gave a course I lectured for some time, a course unit in educational technology. This was to teachers. And one of the primary things teachers do is to communicate. And when you look at the proper definition of communication, you can go and Google it, you can try and research it. It isn't a matter of just talking and it ends there. Communication is a cycle which has different parts, and all these different parts must be fulfilled. There must be a message that is being sent. There should be a sender. there should be, you have to consider the platform or the environment in which there must be a receiver, and that and the roles of the sender and receiver interchange, because the receiver at a certain point digests and then gives feedback. It may either be I accept what you're saying or I do not accept. So the proper education, as we shall see later, includes communication. Not just training, but communication. And that communication should be understood. The end user is part and parcel of the change. So if you do not get the end user on your side, then you'll fail to achieve that organizational change. So what is organizational change? If we were to try to understand, we've seen it before, but let us understand it in a holistic manner. First and foremost, we are focusing on people within the organization. One of the big mistakes ICT does is to focus on the technology, but forget that unless this technology is adopted by people, the end user, this technology will remain a piece of art. Yeah? This technology may just remain a piece of art. So it is important that you're focusing on the people. So that's what change management does. It's forcing us ICT people to focus on the people. And why do we focus on? As we're focusing on them, what are we trying to do? We try to think of ways to motivate. First of all, we want to measure performance. We want to motivate the people to want that performance, and also want to reward performance. That is why we are doing this. That's why we are striving with change management. Again, what does this point to? It points back to the primary objective of ICT strategy and policy planning, to help the organization, facilitate the organization achieve its strategic goals. So this is why we are striving to develop innovative ways to measure performance, to motivate and reward. It is designing programs that will ensure that all staff, either existing or future staff, are trained, are given specific training so that they can be able to use the infrastructure that exists to help the organization achieve its strategic goals. For instance, in your ICT policy plan, as we talked, we said there should be a training policy, so that when you're recruiting staff, you first of all require them to have certain basic minimum skills, and then you train them to use the systems or the infrastructures that are core to the organization. So it is that this is what the change management is all about. It involves analysis and definition of all changes that the organization is going to experience. Those who are basically going to manage a project, whatever project, whether it's putting up a new system or implementing strategy and policy, you should be able to determine or define or identify what changes are going to happen. Who will experience these changes? Yeah. And basically preempt any negative responses that you may experience. That's what it means to analyze and define all changes that the organization will face. The proactive part is ensuring that you get people on your side. That is the proactive part. Now, in a nutshell, this diagram on this slide demonstrates what change management is all about. So it's looking at our current situation and where we need to make the changes. And we analyze this by looking at the future state that we want. This is basically where we talked about the analysis that we talked about with your strategy. So your strategy should be spelling out the future state you want to achieve. Now, once you have these two pictures, then you identify the changes that need to happen. If it is changes in skills, changes in organizational structure, if it is changes in business processes, we identify this at this point. And once we do that, once we identify that, we then go ahead to train our staff, to communicate and train our staff to move towards this future state that we have identified. And once we do that, we then have sustained outcomes where we know we are now driving towards our identified organizational goals. So what's the point of change management? The first point is what I've been talking about. We want to be able to attain our strategic goals. That's one of the reasons we carry out change management. Avoid rework. We want to avoid repetitiveness, or rather, we don't want to implement something and then later on realize, oh, we hadn't prepared the people to carry this out, to make these changes. I've seen this happen, especially at UMU, when Synod was implemented. One of the things we experienced, especially with the providers, was that for them, the change management they considered change management to be done using threats. If you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. That kind of attitude. And what happened is that even today, we're still receiving the same training that was given in 2016. Even now, it's still being done because that change management wasn't considered. Third is to stay within budget. We want a smooth transition from the old to the new. So in situations where you don't want to waste money that you have implemented, and you have invested, and you may want to go back and rework your budget. Look at the case of the Clarion School for Boys. That is a classical case of where a budget was not, the significance of how much money was actually invested was not realized. And at the end, when they were trying to evaluate themselves, there was a new system that was in the market, and what they had implemented and didn't even achieve anything out of it was now considered obsolete, from the perspective of the providers. What happens when we fail to integrate change management? One, we fail to achieve our outcomes. And again, go back to the reasons why you're carrying out strategy and policy implementation. Why? What outcomes did we want to achieve? You also risk end users failing to adopt the system. Look at the case of Clarion. And then you have a situation where you may now start carrying out change management at the last minute, when the window for influence has actually gone. It's actually gone. So what are the different stages of management? We're also going to see some graphs that may indicate how some points that you may need to consider as you're carrying out change management. Now, some of the negative things that you may have to proactively consider. The sense of loss. Everyone, we are all comfortable with the business processes that we are doing, and we always see the goodness in them, and we don't necessarily want to let go of them. Consider anything. It could be you trying to buy a new car. You'll still love your old car, whatever the case. And you'll have that sense of loss when you sell your old car, even if you're getting a new one. So that sense of loss is something that you should expect and that you should manage. You should manage proactively, specifically by pointing out why we are carrying out this change. What is the point of carrying out this change? What is the primary end game, the result that we want to achieve? A sense of confusion. This is expected. There must always be a sense of confusion. Why? Because you're bringing in something new. We are familiar with the old, and when you bring in a new routine, especially for adults, for young people, especially young children, I look at my niece's son that I stay with. Anything new, normally he adapts to it very quickly. I imagine if it was me in his position, it would be quite different. At my age, I don't really want something new. I'm confused about it. I don't really want to learn something new. So that sense of confusion, especially considering that something new is being taught. Skepticism will have to exist. There must always be skepticism, especially amongst employees. People will always be skeptical. How sure are we about the security of this new system? How sure are we that this is going to bring about increased productivity? That skepticism will always exist. But this can always be countered by actually seeing the benefits of the new system. Now, when we have positive response, this graph shows us the flow of the end users as they adopt to the new system. First is the uniform optimism. Usually in the first communication you may have with the stakeholders or end users, and you're making a presentation, there's always that certainty, there's always that positive response, especially because this is something you're speaking about in a theoretical manner. We are saying this new system or this new way of doing things is going to bring about this, that, or the other. The audience is always optimistic and certain. But within that communication, there will always be some pessimism, informed pessimism, especially when people have, we will talk about that, okay, we have such and such procedures, they lead to this, what will happen when this comes in? And that is always best answered with showing that, oh, this benefit will not lose this benefit just because we're bringing in this new process. The next that follows is hopeful realism. When we're saying I'm hopeful this will come out, especially after you've responded to all the doubts that may exist. Once that is done, you have the informed optimism, the confidence that something is going to succeed. And once it is implemented and they see that the results are actually positive, then you have satisfaction. Now, there's the very negative side of things. It's possible to start with a very negative response. And in your audience, you'll have both. You have the positive and the very positive and the very negative. The very negative start with stability, especially when you're stable with what you're doing. You really don't want to change. Two, they don't want to be mobilized. They don't want to come and participate in the meetings that maybe the communications you want to give. They really don't want to do that. If they do come, or when they do come, there's always denial. And with denial, they're usually expressions of anger. Yeah, bitter expressions of anger that I had this happened when this organization did this thing. Now, this is when you come in to bargain. You may offer concessions like, okay, let's run 2 parallel systems and we see. Or let's slowly phase out this one as we see how this one is performing. Usually there is expressions of depression, or people, especially when they are losing the old system. But along the way, they also begin to test, especially if you test and see. There is something the religious always have where they say, they come and see what we do when they're trying to invite new members of congregations. They tell you, come and see, or test and see. So in the testing process, one sees whether there is actually this actually works or does not work. Then the final thing is acceptance, especially when users see something actually works. So this is the spectrum for the negative responses, and you have to manage both perspectives, because your audience will always have both. This diagram, it basically replicates what we were saying before, where we start with denial, which leads to resistance. And then once somebody is introduced to the new process or the new system, they begin to explore, and eventually you have commitment. Now, key point is that this thing must actually work. It must actually work. Any questions so far?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, please.
Doctor, for me, my question is, at what point do I need to start looking at change management? Because I was wondering, should I start before even the system is brought in, or I start when there is already, when maybe at the level of installation, or when everything is done?
As long as you have implementation, whether it's the system or your new strategy and policy, as long as you're ready to implement, then start with change management. So the change management, as you're implementing your new system, your new strategy or policy, it comes together hand in hand with the change management. Robert, have I answered your question?
Yes, Doctor, because there's the service provider moved from and went to another one, but each whatever thing happens, someone compares now with the old one.
Mm-hmm.
We never used to get this. We never used to get that. So that's why I was wondering at what stage. But I think now,
and that now, as you're going to implement the system, I'll show you. We're actually going now to how we carry out change management. Where you begin, let's just look at this slide actually. So as you're going to implement your system, you also begin to plan for change management. Yeah. So this is the planning process where you have two major stages: planning and stakeholder analysis. So when you're planning, you're asking why is change happening? What is changing and why is it happening? So here you're carrying out an analysis of what exactly is going to change. Is it the business processes? Is it a new system? Is it the end users are going to experience a new system? Are they going to experience new functionality? So on and so forth. So here you're planning together with the team. Yeah. Before you implement, you also determine who is going to be affected. Who is going to be affected? So you carry out a stakeholder analysis. These are the people you're going to be communicating with to inform them about the change that is going to happen. Then you analyze the impact of the change. What impact will this change create? Are roles going to be changed? Are people going to be fired? Will people be demoted? Whatever it is, you carry it out because a proper communication has to be made to these stakeholders. Yeah. So so in this time, this is that after you've done this, you communicate. Now, in the evaluation stage, you carry out a leadership engagement. Later on, we shall see how it's actually called sponsors. you create sponsors, people who are going to lead change in the different departments where the effect is going to be done. This one, the workforce impact assessment, is where you analyze impact of change. Then once you've done this, you communicate. You communicate to whoever is going to be impacted. Communicate to them. Once you've communicated and you have gotten some level of acceptance, you carry out training. So in the training process, you've implemented the system or the new procedure or the new strategy or policy, then you carry out the training. So when you carried out the training, you then carry out evaluation to see that there is a sustained adoption. Robert, have I answered your question?
Yes, doctor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, there are several methodologies. You can go ahead and search for those methodologies of change management, but the most commonly used is the Prosky's three-phase change management methodology. Again, I'm just pulling out one methodology, but you can go ahead and search for others. And this one has three phases. The first one is preparation, the next is management, and the third is reinforcing change. And as we go through them, you'll actually see this previous framework, the stages become emphasized. So the first phase for preparing for change management, this is where the planning process, when we consider what is going to change, yeah, what exactly is going to change, who will be affected. Now, once you're done with this stage, you come up with a profile. That profile tells you what is going to change, by what magnitude, what is the scope. Will it happen only in this department? Will it happen throughout the entire organization? And then the impact. Yeah, you determine the impact. What the impact of that? What impact will this change have? Maybe on organizational structure, on roles and things, so on and so forth. Then you should have an attributes profile, organizational attributes profile. So this one looks at the groups that are going to be impacted. And any particular specific attribute that may contribute to the challenges or what may contribute to a challenge or because of the change. You should have that profile. Then you should have a change management team structure. So here we are looking at resources that will be needed. So resources include people, the team of the people who are going to be dealing with, what they will need. And this project team that is going to change, including the project sponsors, the people that are going to drive change within the different departments. So in preparing, we also have sponsorship assessment. So this is where you identify those people who are going to lead change. Those are those who are going to lead changes in the different departments. Impact assessment. So here you're identifying the groups that will be impacted and how they may be impacted. You also try to foresee the challenges that they may face. Take an example in terms of skill, in terms of training, how long will they be taken from their duties? How may this impact them in maybe the resources they have at their hands, if their computer needs to be upgraded and things like that. Then you also need to have a change management strategy. Yeah. And this one is basically, this is where you try to align the changes based on the changes that are going to happen, and then articulate them properly to those who are going to be affected. we come to phase 2. So phase 2 is actually implementing your change management. So here, this involves, first of all, communication. This is where you articulate the message and receive feedback. Remember what communication is about. It's not just sending messages, but you should be able to receive feedback and respond to any positive or negative feelings people may have towards the change. 2 is a sponsorship roadmap. So this is where you have your group of sponsors, and you outline for them the actions that are going to be needed for them to be able to lead those changes. Take an example, you may have a coaching strategy where you teach them, or you first of all train them what the system does, and where they need to respond to their colleagues within their specific departments. A training plan, yeah. This is where you consider what training do we need to give, to who do we need to give the training. Do we need to take people outside of the workplace? Do they need to be seated in their natural environment so that they can see that this thing works within its natural environment? So remember, when we talked about the sponsorship, we talked about a coaching plan. So a coaching plan is training the leaders, the training of trainers, equipping them that they should be able to respond to their team members within their departments. The resistance management plan. So here you proactively and reactively address any issues that may be raised against these new changes. Phase 3. So phase 3 is reinforcing. So phase 2 helps with the implementation. Phase 3 is to ensure that the changes continue to happen. That after we train our users, that they continue to use the new system and not continuously go back to the old system or the old way of doing things. So here you set up a structure where to see if employees are actually doing the job in the new way that they need to be done. You identify any gaps. If there's any gap, you identify and correct that gap. You can think here of the Clarion School for Boys. Maybe asking, for example, there was one person within Clarion who said that every time he or she was going to use the system, try to access it in the morning, he or she always found a line, and then after they therefore abandoned. So you identify how you identify any of such gaps, and then correct it to ensure that there's a smooth transition. Make sure to celebrate success, especially individuals who have adopted and are using the system. The key activities is to measure changes in behavior. That is the way people are, for example, getting feedback on maybe how many people are now using the new business process and to what degree. And then always have a corrective action plan. This is where when you've identified the gaps, especially after measuring changes, correct those gaps. Find out why people are not maybe going all the way, or they're going halfway, or not going anywhere at all. Make sure you come in and understand why, and then correct those gaps. Have reinforcement mechanism where you ensure you have continued compliance, ongoing training and coaching, just to make sure that in case there is something that has not been understood, you should have that ongoing training to reinforce or to close any gap in the knowledge gap of the new system, the new way of doing things. Recognizing individuals or groups that have embraced change. Finally, publicly celebrating those who have adopted the new way of doing things. Do we have any question on this final session?
Thanks, Doctor.
Yes,
So
please.
my question would be on changes that are not successful.
Mm.
If you make a change and it doesn't succeed, so
Mhm.
is there like any fallback in the plan for
Yes.
change?
The first thing is to find out why that change didn't happen, why there was no change to the new way of doing things. That's the first thing. And then address the why. Address it. Make sure that there is a correction. That's why we have correcting the gaps. Remember, if we do not carry out the change, that means we are failing in attaining our overall strategic objective. And that's what we want. We want to remove from the current state. We have ascertained that the current state, the current way of doing things, has not helped us get to our future state. And we want to get to our future state. So we have implemented this new system, this new policy, this new strategy with the objective of achieving the overall the strategic goal. So if we don't get that change, that means we are failing to achieve our overall strategic goal. So the issue is that once you find that there is a gap, correct the gap. That's why it requires continuous evaluation. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, you have. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have any other question?
No.
No?
Maybe, Doctor, to the contribution.
Yes, please.
The other thing I've seen also work maybe is identifying some champions early enough. Those who are early adopters. Sometimes they help in convincing others.
Yes. Yeah, that is true. That is where we say celebrating success, where we have that celebration of success, where anyone who has adopted and they can give a testimony. Should I say testimony in quotes about the goodness of this thing? A key point, an example I can give you is e-learning at UMU. At first, when ICT when we tried it, there was very slow uptake. But when there was a project specifically focusing on new ways of teaching and learning, and it was directed at showing that we are trying to develop graduates or students who are taught using the problem-centered way of teaching and learning, staff members, specifically academic staff, came up and began to, they themselves were once training other staff members on how to use e-learning tools. Now that was a huge game changer for using e-learning at UMU. And it's one of the things that promoted embracing e-learning during the COVID pandemic, that particular group of lecturers. Do we have any other comment or question? No?
No, Doctor.
Okay, so maybe we can close for today, and tomorrow we can have our presentations. Our presentations on the group assignment. We have, from the list I got, we have 3 groups. So we should be able to finish fairly early. The 3 group, but Twine had pointed out there were 2 people, I think, who were not in Moodle. Had you received any response from them?
I think the response was not good. Looks like some are not taking this module. Maybe the groups they are in, maybe tomorrow they will let us know if they participated or not.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Maybe Twine, Mayombo, I think left the course.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then let us take those groups that we have. Let's meet tomorrow, and we have that group assignment, those group assignments. Then I should have put up also your final assessment, which is individual, on Moodle tomorrow afternoon.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you everyone.
Okay, doctor.